Anyway, right, we have got a fantastic next couple of sessions coming up, and I'm absolutely delighted to be inviting Matti Jette, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer for CGI, to the stage. Now, Matti is back by popular demand. She spoke with us at our symposium at the end of 2022, and she is a font of absolutely all things environmental sustainability, but she's actually a really inspirational speaker, so you are going to be absolutely captivated as Matti is telling us
That's
about.
very
I'll pick you up big time now. Absolutely captivated as she shares the story of CGI's plan to hit net zero. So Matti, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Yeah, the pressure. Good morning, everybody. Before I start, it would be good to just check how many of us work in sustainability roles. I'm assuming everybody just got show of hands. Maybe not. Oh, okay, interesting. How many of us work with sort of net zero type of activities? So I think I've got hopefully I've got the right pitch for the presentation today. Just to introduce myself, I'm Matti Jette and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for CGI. I've been with CGI since April 2022, and prior to that I worked for the UK government as the head of sustainability for about 9 years. I did many things, from helping UK government develop their net zero strategy, focusing on our social aspect of sustainability and developing the governance, and focusing on the role of IT and tech to help achieve sustainable outcomes here in the UK, but also to demonstrate our leadership in tech and science internationally. And prior to that, I worked with the United Nations for quite a few years in doing various things. What I am going to share today, however, is just a little bit about CGI and our net zero approach and journey and what we're working on. A little bit about CGI. We were founded in 1976. We're a 12 billion organization. For those that might not know much about us, we're about 91,000 consultants based in 400 locations in 40 countries. We have about 5,500 clients benefiting from our end-to-end IP solutions. On the map, you might see a few areas that appear grey. We do operate in several locations and regions. Some of them may be hidden because we are maybe a partner or somebody or a company delivering things for an organization that may not necessarily want us to disclose. We do many things from security, defense to working across satellites, health, across pretty much several, if not all, of the industries. A little bit about our net zero program and net zero target and goals. We very much follow a 1.5 degree pathway, which most of you will know is sort of mandated. I would say mandated. Maybe that's might be a stretch for some, but I would say mandated by the IPCC that we all try and follow that 1.5 degree pathway. We have a target of 46% emissions reductions for our scope 1 and our scope 2 in terms of our operations, and a further 46% for business travel, and expanding that into our entire scope 3, and I'll walk through that in a few minutes. Our targets are very much verified. They're with the SBTi. We have to report on that, and it's been a very, very interesting journey for us, actually, to say the least, in terms of helping the organization understand what it means to have that SBTi target and how that impacts operations and some of the tough decisions that they need to make in terms of purchasing decisions that we make, and indeed the governance, the profit, and sort of deciding travel, related-based activities versus actually pulling back from travel and trying to deliver that in-house, or meeting clients face-to-face versus meeting clients online, etc. Those are all sort of discussions that take place via our board discussions, and you can imagine there are some pretty heated conversations there, because we're very much saying do not travel, hit the target, and they're saying we need to make money at it. How do we do this? So it's a very, very interesting conversation indeed, and one that I enjoy. We also have a 50% target for our supply chain to ensure that our 50% of our suppliers by spend have indeed set a science-based target. We're looking to push that up to 70%. Again, comes with its own challenges there, which I'm sure you will all have gone through as well. And then, of course, not forgetting nature and biodiversity and the role that plays, very much from our offsetting neutralization perspective. That's right at the bottom of our hierarchy. We're not focusing on that. We are very much focusing on absolute emissions reductions first, and then offsetting. Although there is a dilemma there around, well, actually thinking about the science, if you invest in seagrass or a tree project, thinking about the fact that it takes quite a few years for trees to grow, and actually you can't begin accounting for them, on day one to say we planted 10,000 trees and therefore we have offset X amount of emissions. So we very much have to think through our strategy and when would be the right time for us to sort of invest in those activities. I think you will all be familiar with the GHG protocol and also the guidance around reporting for emissions across scope 1, 2, and 3. And I love that diagram because it just clearly explains, especially to colleagues that may not be familiar with the different areas in terms of net zero and what that means. So just being able to bring that to life for our board, and also helping them to understand what the 15 categories are, really, what that means in the context of business. It's very easy and well for us to say purchase goods and services. Well, I've actually got a sort of CFO kind of going, what does that mean? Actually translate that for me, and what do I need to do? And so just being able to break the language down to actually it's the things you purchase and suppliers we work with, and just being really clear about what each of those categories are and what they mean. I think the thing that I find very interesting about scope 3 reporting is the borders and the lines between what goes where. So you will have purchased goods and services, which will have transportation, embodied carbon. So embodied carbon would be the emissions as a result of producing and manufacturing a specific product. So this laptop in front of me would have been manufactured somewhere. Being able to factor the energy that was used to produce this laptop, the transportation, up until it's sort of here and the use of it. The sort of boundaries between what do we factor and what do we include within the purchased goods category, what goes into upstream or downstream reporting can be quite detailed and tricky for some to sort of navigate. I always say to colleagues that the important thing is you have to be very clear in terms of what methodology you're using. Actually, you're not including transportation within purchased goods. You've decided it's going to be within category 4 of your upstream transportation. As long as you're very clear in the methodology and where you're accounting for specific emissions, then most organizations or whoever you're reporting to tends to sort of understand, really. Hopefully I'm preaching to the converted. Why net zero? But just to set out the sort of things I normally say to our board or to organizations that are looking to set out on this journey. So the increased pressure and the sort of legislation, some of us will be aware TCFD, and other legislation that's sort of mandating that we report on this. For CGI, we're in a very interesting position where we're a service provider to several stakeholders. For example, the UK government have a very big criteria that they specifically require and request of sort of organizations to report against. But we're also a buyer, and also, you know, we ourselves then have to consider what we are asking our suppliers and the organizations we're working with. So there's the sort of increased pressure in being able to demonstrate your activities around net zero. Of course, governments have highlighted clients requesting for this. Let's not forget it's the right thing to do, which really should be right at the top. But also the efficiencies, the innovations, and the opportunities that actually come along as you progress your net zero journey and approach. And for us, we've seen many opportunities actually. A good example was just last year, I had a very, very difficult sort of CIO to convince that he needed to reduce his emissions for his data centers. And he was absolutely convinced that he did not need to do anything really. And so I had to sort of go away and come back and think about how am I going to convince him to actually, you know, achieve what we need to achieve. And there was a hook there. He had an operational target to reduce operational costs by 5% for his IT. I thought, right, okay, let's try and link and dot the lines there. And it just so happens that, you know, when we did some modeling, we could reduce his energy consumption associated with buildings. So we've got data centers that are within our buildings and offices. And actually, the energy we're paying for there was quite a lot as a result of running these massive data centers. And so we were able to implement new innovations, digital twin, AI, and we kind of merged all of those to tell the story and to inform of the sort of energy consumption that he was producing as a result of running CPU and memory. It was wonderful. He ended up saving 155K per annum, and he was converted from there. He was actually our champion. So it's just, you know, sustainability, net zero. There are opportunities that do come along or that are there that we can tap into, and we can also explain or demonstrate to colleagues that may be struggling to sort of understand what it is that we're doing. And the other thing I did want to share was around understanding the levers within your control. So this is a debate that comes up quite often in the boardroom in terms of, well, what's within our control and actually what's not within our control, and actually tell me scientifically with a 0.5 exactly where these, 10% emissions reductions would come from, so that we know exactly what we're going to do. And actually that's a fair question. That's a very transparent and open conversation, discussion, debate that needs to be had. We've done quite a bit of work around looking at the grid and what's happening in terms of the changes, the belt within the grid. But just, I'm sure you can see on the screen there some good examples of actually these are potentially things that may be perceived as not being within our control, but they are advantages there with actually doing a deeper analysis and assessment of the grid and what's going to happen in terms of the UK's energy profile over the years and how that impacts you, or the automobile industry and the ability for the industry to transition to electric vehicles, and actually being quite scientific in modeling what does that mean in terms of the profile for members or employees that may be traveling to work, and how we could tap into that, because that's the language several of our board members understand. I'll move really quickly. We've done a very scientific modeling of our net zero to 2030 to look at where our reductions would come from, and actually across scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and being very clear, we can hit this, we can achieve this. It's not complicated. It's just, you just need to say yes, and we will guide you through it. But naturally, people tend to be very reluctant in terms of saying yes to things that they might not understand. So just being able to apply the science behind that. The line at the top is really the 1.5 degree line reduction, that you can't go over that line. Anything below that line means you're actually doing pretty well and you're going to be hitting that target. The green line is where we're looking to hit our 2026 target, and anything past that is where we would look to set our near-term targets. For those that might not know what near-term targets are, you need to set a short-term target effectively, and you need to set a long-term target. So your near-term target is your short-term target. And we've learned some lessons along the way. Those lessons being around offsets. Actually, should we worry ourselves about offsetting and the strategy? I'll be honest, we're not worrying about that right now because we've got a lot of things to worry about. The year-on-year reductions and what really impacts those reductions or increases and how do you address them. We've learned quite a bit about, actually we don't need to worry about facilities and buildings because they're our allies, they're on board. We've got green energy and renewable energy. We probably need to be worrying about profit versus travel versus what do I need to do there. And of course, supply chain, I'm sure this conversation is going to come up quite a lot over the next conversations, but supply chains and how do we collaborate with others? How do we drive this target through the supply chain? And there's obviously a few lessons learned from our perspective there. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed that.